Greece urgently needs help to cope with a six-fold rise in migrants arriving on its islands since last year, piling more pressure on its debt-ridden economy, the United Nations said on Friday. An average of 600 migrants were arriving by sea each day, many of them fleeing poverty and conflicts in Syria, Iraq, and Libya, at a time when the Athens government is facing its own economic crisis, said the UN Refugee Agency on CR. The European Union needed to come to Greece's aid as it does not have the resources to handle an additional humanitarian crisis. Many of its own people are suffering, UNRWA chief spokeswoman Melissa Fleming told journalists in Geneva. Around 42,000 migrants arrived in often flimsy, overcrowded boats in Greece this year, 6 times the same period last year, the UNRWA said, part of a growing influx risking the crossing from North Africa to Europe. The figures have increased dramatically, particularly in Greece. We expect it to continue at least at this pace if not become even bigger, Fleming said on her return from Greece. The numbers arriving so far this year almost equaled the total seen in all of 2014, she said. Most did not stay but carried on walking through Macedonia and Albania towards northern Europe, she added. Many of Greece's Aegean islands including Kos did not have the services, food supplies, and drinking water to cope with the migrants, she said. Greece delayed repayment of an IMF loan on Friday and a deputy minister said the government might call snap elections if its international creditors did not soften their terms for more aid. The lenders have demanded tax hikes, privatizations and pension reform in exchange for aid to save Greece from bankruptcy. But the proposal has triggered fury in Greece's ruling Syriza party, which says Greece cannot take more cuts and austerity. Nearly 90,000 refugees and migrants have crossed the Mediterranean so far this year, double the rate of 2014, while at least 1,850 drowned or are missing at sea, according to the UNHCR. The total includes 46,500 who have arrived in Italy. UK police find migrants in trucks. Meanwhile, British police were questioning 4 Polish truck drivers on Friday after authorities found 68 migrants crammed in the back of trucks at a port northeast of London. The 53 adults and 15 children were found during a proactive search Thursday at Harwich International Port in Essex, Britain's Home Office said. The migrants were from Afghanistan, China, Vietnam, and Russia. Some were hospitalized as a precaution, but all have now been released. The Polish drivers were arrested on suspicion of facilitating a breach of UK immigration laws. The stowaways were discovered on vehicles that had arrived on the Stena Hollandica ferry from Hoek of Holland, Netherlands. Britain's border force uses sniffer dogs, heartbeat detectors, and carbon dioxide probes to find stowaways. Myanmar's defense. Elsewhere, Myanmar said on Thursday that persecution of its Rohingya Muslim population was not the cause of Southeast Asia's migrant crisis, a day after the United States called on the country to give full rights to the minority to help end the exodus. President Barack Obama said this week that Myanmar needed to end discrimination against the Rohingya if it was to succeed in its transition to a democracy, as Washington upped the pressure on the country to tackle what it sees as one of the root causes of a migration that the region has struggled to cope with. Myanmar does not recognize its 1.1 million Rohingya as citizens, rendering them effectively stateless. Almost 140,000 were displaced in deadly clashes with Buddhists in the country's western Rakhine state in 2012. It had been portrayed that discrimination and persecution were causing people to leave Rakhine state, Myanmar's Minister of Foreign Affairs Wuna Mongalwin told diplomats and international agencies in Yangon, but that was not true. He pointed to the number of Bangladeshis on board a migrant boat that landed in May as proof that the influx of boat people was a regional problem linked to human trafficking. This incident has shown to the region as well as the international community this is not the root cause, he said. The boat he referred to was intercepted by Myanmar's navy last month. Myanmar has said 200 of the 208 people aboard were economic migrants from Bangladesh. But a Reuters investigation found that 150 to 200 Rohingya had also been aboard that boat, but were spirited away by people smugglers in the week before the navy brought it to shore. Tariq Muhammad, deputy chief of mission at the Bangladesh embassy in Yangon, told Reuters that only 150 people from that boat had been identified and documented as Bangladeshis. Zha Imong, the Yangon region ethnic Rakhine affairs minister, told reporters after the same briefing that if genocide was taking place in Rakhine state, then it was against ethnic Rakhine Buddhists. "We are now in danger of being overrun by these Bangladeshis," said Zha Imong. Earlier, he had told the briefing that a population explosion in Bangladesh was to blame for the migrant crisis, in comments that visibly angered the ambassador from Bangladesh, Mohammad Sufur Rahman. Sufur Rahman declined to talk to reporters afterwards. The powerful speaker of Myanmar's parliament, Shui Man, wrote an open letter to United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon appealing for international organizations to avoid creating misconceptions about our country and aggravating communal tensions and conflict. The letter, dated June 3 and published in Myanmar state media on Thursday, came after the UN Security Council held its first closed-door briefing on human rights in Myanmar last week. A council diplomat inside that briefing said UN Human Rights Chief Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein described the Rohingya as facing institutional discrimination.